chapter 36, we start there this evening. It's my favorite part of Elihu's speech. Although I think he's somewhat a bit presumptuous at the beginning. He said, I'm going to speak on God's behalf. Not only does God not need anyone to tell him anything. He doesn't need anything. He doesn't need anyone to speak on his behalf in the sense of defending anything there is to defend about it. But I believe he has the right attitude.
Tom, turn on.
I believe that he has the right attitude. Am I on that? Yeah. The right attitude. He's not being, I don't think he's being self-righteous or arrogant in it. Begin reading with me at verse 5. Behold, God is mighty, but despises no one. He is mighty in strength of understanding. He does not preserve the life of the wicked, but gives justice to the oppressed. He does not withdraw his eyes from the righteous, but they are on the throne with kings. For he has seated them forever, and they are exalted. And if they are bound in fetters, held in the cords of affliction, then he tells them their work and their transgression, that they have acted defiantly. He also opens their ear to instructions and commands that they turn from iniquity. If they obey and serve him, they shall spend their days in prosperity, and their years in pleasures. But if they do not obey him, they shall perish by the sword, and they shall die without knowledge. Now, the thing is that as you listen to that, as you think about the things that he is suggesting there, it's almost as if he's taken the party line. You know, from the standpoint of this is what happens to the wicked and this is what happens to the just. I think, however, that he again is not taking the argument to the extent that the three others had been. Remember, they're saying that all of this happens to Job, all of this has happened to you because you've sinned. He's establishing, in my mind, as I look through this, he's establishing here the principle of fact. We talked about the statement in Galatians chapter 6. If you sow to the flesh, you're going to reap it. You know, if you sow to the Spirit. You know, in other words, wherever you sow, that's what you're going to reap. I think in essence, this seems to be what he's saying here. And this is how I personally understand it. But he really is talking fundamentally here about the greatness of God. The superiority of our Creator. And so, if you drop down to verse 16, he's urging Job to yield to God. Now, this is interesting because, in one sense, Job has never stopped acknowledging God. But he certainly has been resistant, and again, the arguments that he's making is, what's happening to me is not fair. You are doing me wrong. Look at what he says in verse 16. Indeed, he would have brought you out of dire distress into the broad place where there is no restraint. And what is set on your table would be full of riches. But you are filled with the judgment due to the wicked. Judgment and justice take hold of you. because there is wrath. Beware lest he take you away with one blow. For a large ransom would not help to avoid it. Will your riches or all the mighty forces keep you from distress? Do not desire the night when people are cut off in their place. Take heed, do not turn to iniquity. Now, remember what we said a couple of weeks ago. We said it again last week, so 3 weeks in a row. Job, Eliphaz, Bildad, and Zophar said, Job, you're suffering because you've sinned. Right? Elihu is saying what? You're sinning because you're suffering. And in essence, that is what he's saying. If Job had accepted the hardships, remember he did at the beginning. Remember those statements that he makes in chapters 1 and 2? I came into the world naked and naked I shall leave. And I'm paraphrasing, of course, but the Lord gives and the Lord takes away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. That seems to be a general acceptance of the situation that he finds himself. But as we move away from that, chapter 3, he wishes he'd never lived, and then he starts the discussion with his friends. You begin to see that he's highly frustrated. My complaint is bitter, he has said. And so, instead of accepting the hardship, the situation, with the disposition of, okay, I've got to deal with this, I can get through this with God's help, etc., he really didn't see an end to it. And so that, again, is what Elihu seems to be addressing. 24 through 33, let's just read it. Remember to magnify his work, of which men have sung. Everyone has seen it. Man looks on it from afar. Behold, God is great, and we do not know him, nor can the number of his years be discovered. For he draws up drops of water, which distills as rain from the midst, which the clouds drop down and pour abundantly on man. Indeed, can anyone understand the spreading of clouds, the thunder from his canopy? Look, he scatters his light upon it, and he covers the depths of the sea, for by these he judges the peoples. He gives food in abundance. He covers his hands with lightning, and he commands it to strike. His thunder declares it, the cattle also, concerning the raging storm. The majesty of God, the greatness of God. The psalmist says, the heavens declare the glory of God, and the firmament showeth forth his handiwork. Psalm 19. I have a lot of friends that I made in my younger life, particularly when I was in college, to a state school, who are non-believers. I mean, flatly. I guess I would say that 3 of them have declared themselves as atheists that I know. Now, you say, well, why do you have friends like that? I didn't always live the life that I ought to have lived growing up in the church. But I never fully embraced this idea that there was no God. And one of the things that, even in that period of my life when I was not living the way that I ought to have lived, and the thing that really brought me together with these friends that I had for those years, and I've kept in contact with them, is that we loved to hike and do outdoor things, go backpacking, camping. We're in Tennessee Tech, and boy, we love going over to the Caney Fork and fishing and doing things like that. And on one occasion, I remember saying to one of them in particular, I cannot believe that you can't see what I see and not recognize that this was created. That there is a God. I mean, do you understand how people think when they see the majesty and the beauty of the creation, and they say, well, this just happened? Job is announcing the greatness of God here and all of his wonders, all of his majesty. This is really one of my favorite chapters in this book. As you move into chapter 37, he really is, this is the last chapter of Elihu's comments, continuing the thought with regards to the goodness of God, the greatness of God. And so again, as you start reading in chapter 37, Psalms 19 comes to mind. The heavens declare the glory of God. Just read a few verses with me. At this also my heart trembles and leaps from its place. Hear attentively the thunder of his voice and the rambling that comes from his mouth. He sends it forth under the whole heavens. His lightning to the ends of the earth. After it a voice roars and thunders with his majestic voice. He does not restrain, and he does not restrain them when his voice is heard. God thunders marvelously with his voice. He does great things which cannot be comprehended. For he says to the snow, fall on the earth. Likewise to the gentle rain and the heavy rain. You see the highlighting of how creative and majestic God is. Now we're going to move, because we'll get into chapter. We want to go ahead and get into chapter 38 tonight. Here's again. There's an interesting thing. Remember how, as we were concluding last week, we made the observation of what Elihu said, or in chapter 35 in verse 35, and also in chapter 35 in verse 16, where he uses the expression words without knowledge, or speaking without knowledge. Now, that's how God is going to, begin his comments in chapter 38. But what are the questions? What are the questions that God is going to start asking Job about? Well, it's about the environment. It's about the creation. It's about the things that God has done. And so he's not speaking for God. He can't speak for God. But it's interesting that he here in his final comments, he's directing Job's attention to the majesty of God, and he's using the creation as evidence for the majesty and the greatness of God. And then that's what God is going to get into here in just a few moments. And so that's an interesting, I think that's very interesting in how that is laid out. If you look at verses 20, drop down to, we just drop down to verse 19. Well, this is the last comment by Elihu. Teach us what we should say to him, for we can prepare nothing because of the darkness. Should he be told that I wish to speak? If a man were to speak, surely he would be swallowed up. Even now, men cannot look at the light when it is bright in the skies, when the wind has passed and cleared them. He looks from the north as golden splendor. With God is awesome majesty. As for the Almighty, we cannot find him. He is excellent in power, in judgment, and abundant justice. He does not oppress. Therefore, men fear him, and he shows no partiality to any who are wise of heart. And so we see this statement that he's making to Job. It's like an appeal to him to appreciate the greatness of God, God's awesome majesty. And we've already pointed this out as well. Job responded to the comments of the other three. Each time they spoke, Job responds. There's no response to the things that Elihu had said. I don't know what that means with regards to, is Job silent because he doesn't really have an answer? Well, it's because God spoke before Job had an opportunity to speak. I don't buy that argument. I think it's significant that Job does not address the things that Elihu said. Again, we don't agree with everything that Elihu says. We don't assert that Elihu is right in everything he says. But he certainly has a different approach to it. As you read through the things that he says, and if you go back and remind yourself of the things that the other three said, you can even recognize perhaps even that the tone in how it was stated is different. Perhaps Job didn't feel he had to respond. Perhaps his silence was an acceptance of the things that Elihu said. But be that as it may, we don't know what Job's response is, what Job's sense or feeling is with regards to this. But we get an idea with regards to, at the end of the story, of how God feels about it. Because what was required of Eliphaz, Bildad, and Zophar? They had to go make sacrifices. Did Elihu? God obviously didn't feel that Elihu had sinned or had done something that necessitated atonement in the comments that he makes. Most certainly, we can draw the conclusion that the sacrifices that the other three had to make, that sacrifice and that atonement was based upon the things that they had said and accused Job of. I've already told you, I love how chapter 38 begins. Who is this who darkens counsel by words without knowledge? Now you prepare yourself like a man. I will question you, and you will answer me. My son-in-law is he's about to, he's got the paperwork in now, and he's 3/4 of the way down with his dissertation to get his PhD in electrical engineering. And he's already had one round where he's had to present things to his professors. And he's got one more round. He's got one more round to defend. I think they call it to defend. Defend it. And he said, he told me, he says, the first time, he said, you think, you're looking at them, and you're thinking, man, every one of these guys want me to fail. You know, they don't, but that's sort of the look that they have on their face. You know, for the next hour, we're going to make your life miserable. But they start asking questions. The thing is that the questions that they're asking him, it's based upon the work that he's done. So he's required to give them answers. And he's required to defend any questioning that they make with regards to the things that he's written in his dissertation. I had him over at my house on Friday because I'm having lawnmower trouble and I think it's electrical. And I said, "You're almost a PhD. You can't tell me what's wrong with my lawnmower." But and it is electrical. It's not mechanical. I mean, it's not the engine. Job cannot possibly answer these questions. And so there's these questions are over 70 questions, and it's like a rapid fire, one right after another. And what do you think the purpose is? What's the purpose? What's the purpose of these questions?
Probably to humble Job.
It's exactly. The purpose, you might say, to put Job back in his place. You know? Job has been saying what? I want to talk to God. Remember he said, I can't find him. I can't see him. I remember early on, there's no mediator between me and him. If I could just sit down and talk with him, I could show him my case. I would present my case to him, and he would see that I'm right. That's been Job's argument. That's been Job's thinking. And in essence, again, if you go back and look at some of the things that Elihu has been saying, this is exactly what Elihu is arguing from that standpoint. God is God, and you're not. In essence, if you want to put a little summary on Elihu's comment to Job. And God is really just perfectly laying this out. Where were you, verse 4, when I laid the foundation of the earth? Now, Jackson, in his book, has a section, and we'll get to some of these things. He's got an end section on in his book that has a lot of different little topics, and we're going to bring some of these up next week. But I want to address one of those now because they're just so. It's such a good chapter in his book on science in the book of Job. And the first thing that we have to remember is that the Bible is not a science book, is it? The Bible's not even a history book. The Bible is not even a geography book. But it's got a lot of geography in it, doesn't it? It's got a lot of history in it. It's got a lot of science in it. What does the Bible claim that no other book on science, no other book on history, no other book on geography assert?
God created the world.
Well, it does state that as fact. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. But what does the Bible say about itself? It's inspired of God, right? That it's from God. Okay. So now, keep this in mind. If there is a historical fact in the Bible that is proven to be inaccurate, if a historical statement in the Bible is proven to be inaccurate, then the Bible can't claim to be inspired of God. If there's a geographical error in the Bible, if there's a statement of science in the Bible, now again, we're not talking about theory here. We can talk all day long. I always argue that evolution, the general theory of evolution, is not science. It's philosophy. It's philosophy. But be that as it may, we're talking about real scientific facts. Listen. Let me read from Jackson, who quotes from Dr. Henry Morris. Are y'all familiar with Morris? He wrote a book with another gentleman called The Genesis Flood, which I consider to be one of the best books on the flood that you can read, Whitcomb and Morris. He says, "We believe that the scientific accuracy of the Bible is one of its most thrilling evidences of divine origin. Prominent creation scientist Dr. Henry Morris has written, one of the most arresting evidences of the inspiration of the Bible is the great number of scientific truths that have lain hidden within its pages for 30 centuries or more, only to be discovered by man's enterprise within the last few centuries or even years." And then he quotes from another gentleman who wrote a book entitled, "Has God Spoken?" As evidence of their divine guidance, the writers of the Bible have included scientific truths in non-scientific terms. Truth that for centuries the skeptics considered as errors because it disagreed with their darkened understanding. Truths that have come to light in recent times only through painstaking and costly research. Truths that, without the later development of instruments, would have been impossible for us to witness with our own eyes as facts. And another writer by the name of Morton. Many scientific facts which prove the infallibility of Scripture are tucked away in its pages. These proofs are given in non-scientific language. Nevertheless, they substantiate the claims of the authenticity of the Holy Scriptures. In some cases, scientific concepts have been known through the ages, but these concepts are mentioned in a unique manner in Scripture. In other cases, scientific topics have been mentioned hundreds or even thousands of years before men discovered them. And the reason that this chapter is included in this book is because of the things that Job addresses, are the things that God makes mention in this chapter. And again, I'm going to be reading quite a bit from Jackson's book because it's I think it's just so important. So here we go. Where were you when I laid the foundation? Let's read that again. Tell me if you have understanding. Who determined its measurements? Surely you know. Or who stretched the line upon it? And look at verse 6. To what were its foundations fastened? Or who laid its cornerstone when the morning stars sang together and all the sons of God shouted for joy? This particular verse is also used to suggest that the angels were created before the beginning. The spiritual beings came into existence prior to, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. So let me read from Jackson. And Jackson uses the American Standard Version of the Bible. And so his quotes are going to be from the American Standard Version. But he says, God asked, "Where were you when I laid the foundation of the earth? Who determines its dimensions and precisely measured it? Into what were its foundation sockets anchored? Or who laid the cornerstone?" The answer, of course, is eloquent silence, speaking of Job. Man was not in existence when the earth was created, so except that he knows because God has revealed in Genesis 1 and related passages. Be that as it may, the statement with regards to the foundation being fastened, it's the idea of anchoring. And geology, and geologists, and again I know that the vast majority of geologists and geology is taught from an evolutionary standpoint, but there are still some positive facts that can be ascertained from the study of geology. Have found that they're anchored, that the way in which certain underpinning and the way that the continents are certain foundations, land masses are anchored into the earth. How would the people of Job's day know that? Well, they didn't, but God did. And so it's asserted here that he did. Let me read, get back here to this. Here you go. Foundations is the Hebrew word yased, which in a literal sense is referring to the foundation of a house. In verse 6, the question is asked, whereupon were the foundation thereof fastened? Here, the word foundation is the term Eden, meaning a socket, used of the sockets into which pegs were inserted in order to secure the planks of the tabernacle. The word fastened here means to sink down. And so now it's understood that the earth is covered by an outer crust of rock, some 7 to 30 miles thick, which in turn rests upon a mantle or a foundation of heavy rock, which extends down into the heart of the earth some 1,800 miles. Based upon seismic data, scientists suggest that the great land masses of our planet are anchored in sockets which plunge deep into the Earth's mantle, averaging more than 300 miles in depth. And so Jackson writes, and so there may be more than poetry here. Because Job is a poem. But it's inspired information that man did not discover until they had the proper equipment to make such a discovery. And so that, I mean, again, just it's so important that we be impressed with that we understand the nature of that. Next, if you keep reading on then in verse 8, he's asking about the sea from the standpoint of, or who shut in the sea with its doors? I'm looking at two different chapters here, so I've got to be sure to keep my material together. Here we go. So, who shut the sea with doors? All right. Jackson writes, it may be difficult for the average person to realize how threatened by water we land dwellers are. About 71% of the Earth's surface is water. Moreover, the average height of the land is 2,250 feet, while the average depth of the ocean is 13,000 feet. And so the ocean is thus nearly 6 times as deep as the land is high. If the Earth's surface was smoothed out, water would cover the earth more than 2 miles deep. Such a vast amount of water is necessary as an equalizer of temperature and to supply water vapor for rain. But it is not providential that the waters only encroach so far, and their proud waves are stayed. And so he's making a comment here, God is, to Job, about, well, who keeps the water from flooding the land? All right. So if we move on, and I'm going to try to do this continuing with regards to the sea. Have you walked, look at verse 16. Have you entered the springs of the sea, or have you walked in search of the depths of the sea? The earliest secular reference to underwater springs in the ocean is about 63 BC. Some submarine springs are known off the coast of Greece, Italy, and Israel. Off the coast of Australia, fresh water may be dipped in abundance from the sea. In 1976, the U.S. Geological Survey discovered fresh water in the Atlantic along the seacoast from New England to Georgia. But then he also asked, have you walked in the recesses of the deep? David in 2 Samuel 22:16, and I'm reading and quoting from Jackson here, referred to the channels of the sea. The science of oceanography dates from only about 1873. In that year, the Challenger expedition, not the space shuttle, but the ship, commenced the first scientific exploration of the ocean floor. During this study, a canyon 5½ miles deep was discovered in the Pacific. Since that time, numerous other canyons have been found. One near the Philippines is over 7 miles deep. Before the invention of echo-sounding equipment, it was generally thought that the bottom of the ocean would present the appearance of plains, plateaus, and rolling terrain. Now we know that it has valleys and mountain ranges and even canyons to equal all the forms that we find on the land. And that's from he says this is quite a significant statement from Encyclopedia Americana. Some authorities believe that the canyons were formed at the time or shortly after the great flood of Noah's day. Over and over and over as you read through this. This is one of the reasons why I have found Jackson's books so intriguing over the years and helpful. As you read through this, and you can go through this chapter here, and we'll talk more next week about the creatures that are mentioned in the next few passages. But he's dealing with some things that are marvelous, that not only attest or provide evidence for God as a creator, but establishes the Bible as the inspired Word of God. As we said, if there's one scientific fact in the Bible that's proven to be wrong, then the Bible is not from God. But you know what? They've never been able to find that. They've never been able to find one fact in the Bible, historical, scientific. They've never been able to find one thing that the Bible asserts as being wrong. And you would think, with such information as just a few things that we've talked about tonight, that when people would come to recognize the fact that, hey, you know, when that was written, this was well before science and scientists made the discoveries that are being mentioned here. And so you would think that that would take them to look more closely at the real purpose of the Bible, which is man's relationship with God, the necessity of our atonement in Christ, and these things. And so, in other words, you might say that if the science in the Bible is accurate, and the history of the Bible is accurate, and all the other things are accurate, and all the other subjects of which the Bible is not primarily about, then that would increase their wanting to understand that for which the Bible is really about. And it just amazes me that so many discount it. God is asking Job questions that man could not answer during Job's day. The only reason Jackson can make observations that he makes about these things is because in the years since, we've had the technology that has made it possible for us to learn certain things. We'll continue to look at God's questioning Job on things that he could not know, and then we'll wrap up next week by making a few observations about primarily just two things that Jackson addresses at the end of his book with regards to the nature of the devil and human suffering, which are the two other chapters at the end of the book. I'll have the final exam for you for next week for everyone who's taking it for credit.